Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Modbap Osiris Bi-fidelity wavetable oscillator. Now, I'm not big into wavetables particularly. I tend to find them a bit sort of thin and glassy, and you're always looking for something that you can't seem to quite find. However, once you start injecting a little bit of movement, a little bit of modulation, a little bit of change, then that search for that sound sort of becomes a journey. It becomes an adventure. It becomes this never-ending pursuit of something which just gets slightly better, and then it opens up, and then it gets better. And this is very much what I found with the Osiris. Started off going, well, you know, it's a bit plinky plonky. Bit got a glassy, bit sort of icy, and it has very much that morphing wavetable sound that we've come to expect. So, you know, I turn something on, and back again. There's a lot of that in there. So it does a lot of the old morphing wavetable, because there's a shed load of wavetables in there. And if wavetables are something that you look for, you desire, you love to find, you will find plenty. But that's, for me, is not what's interesting about the Osiris. What's interesting about this is where it takes you. Now, there are some fantastic sound demos out there on the internet by musicians far more accomplished than I am. So I'm about to sort of say, just listen to this, and then it's going to sound like a bit sort of mediocre because it's me doing it. That's something that we're just going to have to put up with, because here I am talking about it, so I may as well. But what I mean is that I'm just going to run a sequence through it, and then I'm going to start playing with it, and hopefully that will go some way towards demonstrating why this is quite a phenomenal oscillator. And then we'll get in closer and we'll have a look, and we'll talk about what it is and what it does. But to start with, I'm going to go from this fiddly fabbling, swabbling about, just to moving some of the parameters and see what you think. my point being that every time you move something, every time you change something, it takes you on another step into that adventure where you go, oh, what happens if I keep, oh, what happens if I keep doing that? What happens if I keep doing that? And it just takes you down another road, and it has many roads that you can go down. So Osiris is a wavetable oscillator. It has 4 banks of 32 wavetables, each containing 32 waves, giving you, I don't know, 1024, I suppose, possible waveforms, all of which morph from each other in both the X and the Y direction. So you've got morphing through the wavetable, and you've got morphing from wavetable to wavetable. Those are dealt with by our 2 knobs here. So if I open the decay, he says, yeah, because it has a built-in VCA. So it's kind of a voice all by itself. You don't have to worry about running an envelope or running a VCA, although of course you can, because it has a built-in VCA and a built-in decay knob. And that allows us to move from nicely decaying sounds to blips and blops, or to completely open, which is what we're going to look at now. And at this point, I think I should bring you in. So here is wave X and wave Y. So I move through the wavetable in the X-axis. You can see the waveforms morphing beautifully. That's just so nice, the way that picks out those harmonics. And that's just the first wavetable. I can then nip through to the next one, and then morph through those, or keep both of them moving. And each of them just steps through to another waveform so smoothly, so lovely. The way the wavetables are put together is just gorgeous. You know, they're not like randomly thrown together into a bunch. They are relevant and relative. And the movement is completely sublime. Now, of course, you can play there forever. I mean, that's your standard wavetable oscillator. A whole bunch of wavetables, nicely curated, put together, and you've got 4 banks of them. I mean, we haven't even started. And of course, the temptation is to go steaming through them, which I'm sort of finding is kind of not the point. Really. I mean, I can throw in some modulation from the 3PT here and just let it go. But you know, I'm not convinced that that's the point. I think the point is that you can find some beautiful sounds within here for absolutely any and every occasion. But you'll never stop looking. Well, I'll just come back to, I mean, honestly, Bank A is where I've spent all my time because I haven't finished with Bank A yet. I'm enjoying the simplicity of some of these waveforms because I'm a simple guy. I get excited by analog waveforms, and so something which is approximately an analog waveform and then is perhaps just a little bit fizzed, a little bit bent, yeah, that's where I like to spend my time mostly. So anyway, we'll just go back to there. But there's tons and tons of wavetables in there which you can explore and have a wonderful time doing. But that is not what makes the Osiris interesting and different. It's the other things within here. So the VCA is one with its own decay. It turns it into a little bit of a Platz, I think. It has that sort of vibe to it. You know, you can give it this really nice plucky sound. If I was to go to an ARP. It takes it back nicely to a tick, but something which is always useful and still retains its pitch. And then goes out, you know, as far as you like. To completely open and droning. So that's useful in of itself. But the first area of fascination is the sub-oscillator. Now, many wavetable oscillators come with a sub-oscillator, that's fine. But this gives us 5 different choices. I can have a square wave, a sine wave, a triangle wave, or the current waveform pitched an octave below or 2 octaves below. And then you've got a mix with which you can bring that in. So that's the octave below. I can switch that into 2 octaves. Back to 1. Or I can just make it a triangle wave. Or a sine wave. Or a square wave. That's really starting to sound beefy now. And that bass is staying that square wave while the waveform changes around it. That's lovely. That's lovely all the time. All the time is that lovely. It's just the fact that you can change that timbre. You can alter that tone by using the sub. You're not even necessarily playing with the waveform itself. You're just bringing in some different feels, some different thickness through this subwave. It's just a lovely thing. And we're not done yet with the subwave because the subwave also has its own pitch input and its own output. So you could treat it separately, mix it separately, envelope it separately if you wish, because down here you've got the mix output and the sub output. If you stick something in the sub, then the mix becomes purely the other waveform. So essentially you can play the sub differently. So if I run what I was running before in some fashion, I could take, for instance, the output of the Turing machine here, plug that into the pitch input on the sub. So now the sub is doing its own thing. Which is fascinating. And it has a built-in quantizer. So even though I'm just sticking in random voltages from the Turing machine, I'm not having to use an external quantizer to sort that out. It's just playing stuff inside. And it's completely unrelated to what I'm playing on the keyboard. It's completely separate. And if you disengage that, then it all comes back together again, and you've got this delicious, thick oscillating sound. Oh, that's just quite brilliant. So, I mean, that's a whole other thing by itself, and you've now got a fabulous wavetable oscillator. You've now got a fabulously interesting sub-oscillator, which you can do different things with to create two voices out of this thing, or have it wonderfully bolstering and supporting the waveform that you've chosen, either with the same waveform or with a more basic waveform. It just, I mean, when I talk about iciness and glassiness and weakness of wavetables, no, not anymore. I mean, sure, by itself, but once you start bringing these other elements in, then any thoughts of weakness or weediness are just dispelled. It's also a really loud oscillator. I mean, I've got the VCA down to half because otherwise it keeps overloading stuff. So, and the bass, similarly, that really does start to come through and perhaps overwhelm once you pump it up too far. But you have control over that because you can take the output by itself and treat that separately. Right, okay, so that's the sub. Anything else? Yes, right. Next up, Timbre Mode. Timbre Mode. Oh yes, the Timbre Mode, Timbre Mode here, is a selection of different ways of modulating internally, modulating and folding and messing about with the waveforms. There's two knobs in this. There's Timbre Mode to select the timbre, and then there's an amount to select how much that is going on. It starts rather quizzically, if you ask me, with a pitch shifting, a sort of a detuning mode, which gives us this. Detuning. Into then, you know, a pitch shifting of voices. So I've now got an octave above. I've got the original waveform. I've got an octave below on the sub, or 2 octaves below, which is really kicking it out now. See, here I am off again, exploring, going, oh, that's nice. Then, oh, no, that's nice. Then, oh, no, that's nice. So you put that sine wave in the background, and it just gives it this sort of width without pushing it into distortion or pushing it into anything edgy. It just has this fattening, and you've got the detuning on this thing. That's just lovely. I mean, now I want to start getting into filtering and other bits and pieces, but I'm just trying to focus purely on the sound of the Osiris for this video. I can do that shot now. So I start with a submix off. I'll start with that. Right, next timbre mode is kind of a squashioning. With this, it's essentially, I mean, I see it as kind of pulse width modulation. It sort of squashes and pushes the width of any waveform. it kind of squashed and thin. So it opens up, brings it in. Then next up you have wave folding. You get this kind of window fold where it's folded within a shape. If I make it a bit higher, there we go, you can see the shape now. So I start off with a waveform, then it applies this folding within a shape. Next up is noise. Introduces noise until it's completely noise. Just to show how that comes in and out. I'm just keeping this on. I'm going to go back to the other ones. Now can you hear how they are sort of morphing from one to another? So I've still got noise going on, while at the same time I've got the shape timbre doing its thing as well. And then it's purely the shape. And it starts to bring in the wave folding while still doing the shape, and then moving away from the shape to the wave folding. Then into the pulse width kind of thing. And then you can hear that it's bringing in the detuning while still doing the pulse width modulation. So that's a whole load of stuff right there. The fact that they morph between each other, I'm not entirely convinced that that's awesome or not. I mean, it is. I mean, I think what happens when you start playing with a timbre is that you start to ignore the wavetables. You've decided on a waveform that you quite like, and then you start to go to town with the timbre mode. You start to wavefold. You start to shift and modulate those things about. I think that tends to be the workflow that I'm finding, which is interesting. But because of the slightly crowded nature of the front panel, it's difficult to see exactly what you're turning to here, and so it's quite easy to find a space in between two that you weren't necessarily after or expecting. It could be a good thing, that might be what you're after, but in some ways I would prefer this to be a switchable knob, or I don't know, some other way of selecting it, because you have to go through them to get to the one that you're after. And although going through them is relatively smooth, again, that might not be what you're after. You might want to be going straight from this window thing to the octave thing, but you can't. You have to sweep through the other ones first, if you see what I mean. But, you know, pros and cons. That does give you more accidental discovery of bits and pieces, and it also gives a smooth movement. But, you know, I don't know. I'm in two minds about whether I prefer the morphingness of it or whether I prefer it just to switch straight to the thing that I'm actually after. Now, there's one more which takes up the whole half section of this knob, and this is FM, which is a bit of a lark. So let's stick my thing on again. From a ratio of 1 to a ratio of 8. You can then dial in the amount of. But as I say, now if I wanted to go back to detuning, I'd have to go through everything else to get to it. And you can absolutely modulate the mode. Now, it could be argued, I suppose, that the Timbre mode is just really providing more waveforms, and wouldn't it be better to have those waveforms already in the wavetable, making the whole thing that much simpler? I suppose, because aren't you finding folded waveforms within a wavetable of another bank that were already there? Why would you need to fold a wavetable? Because the beauty of a wavetable is it's packed full of waves. Whereas wave folding tends to be to create complex waveforms out of simple waveforms. Whereas the complexity can already be in here. I suppose that's true. However, what I think the Timbre mode is all about ultimately is that you find a waveform that you like, and then you can apply different things to it. And so you've got a different way of working. You're not just trying to find a wavetable that you like and then find another one that you like. You're taking a waveform and then applying different processes to it in order to modulate that thing individually by itself. So it's kind of this section here. I mean, this section here could be a module by itself. You could slap that in here as a module and apply these sorts of things to all sorts of waveforms and have a lovely time doing it. So the versatility that you're getting with this thing here is quite extraordinary, and it keeps you in this module, in a single module. So for a small system, this is phenomenally powerful, this whole section here. Now the last thing to look at is this fidelity business. Now they've made a whole big fuss, song and dance about this bi-fidelity nature of Osiris, and when we first heard about it and I wrote it up for Gear News, I remember going, I don't really know what they mean. What do they mean by fidelity? Two lots of fidelity. And in some ways it was like, well, because it's twice the quality, because it runs at 96k, it's twice the quality of previous wavetable oscillators. Okay, I can understand that. Or it's also got this lo-fi option. And indeed you have this knob here, fidelity, that swaps between, or fades or morphs between high fidelity and low fidelity. And I guess that's it. I just don't quite understand why that's such a big deal, because sure, that's a nice feature, but it's not like a defining feature of anything. Having bit crushing or, you know, quality reduction in a module is a regular standard feature. But also, to add to that I don't really like it. So let me show you what I mean. So fidelity here, high fidelity is what we're in at the moment, and you'll hear the effect as I turn it down. I mean, I confess I quite like it here, you know, turned up to 1. That gives a crunchy edge, quite like that. There maybe there's a little bit of unexpected distortion coming in, but then it sort of just turns into noise. I mean, if you allow me, if I turn that off and take us back to noise here, it's kind of the same deal. So that's the noise on the timbre. Bring this back here, bring this in. Oh. It's more or less the same thing. So yeah, I mean, it has something going for it. Let's see if I can play. Maybe it needs a bit more nuance and playing to really appreciate it. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you know, I'm not saying it's awful, not at all. Well, as with everything, it reveals itself through the playing and the manipulation of it. But you know, I kind of like it up that way. So there you have it. Osiris from Modbap, the Bi-fidelity wavetable oscillator. Shed load of wavetables accessible from a couple of knobs, but then you have this sub engine, which is just beautiful. It brings such a depth to the waveforms that you kind of lose any of that negativity one may have towards wavetables. The fact that you can pull it in as a simple waveform or as a complex waveform, that you can pitch it down 1 or 2 octaves, but then you can take it apart by pumping in a completely different sequence to it. And if you use that intelligently rather than randomly as I did, it means that you can use this oscillator as a 2-voice thing, as a 2-oscillator deal, and have those low notes, you know, boistering the higher melodies as it goes along. That's fantastic. And you can take that sub out and treat it separately. You want to envelope it differently, you can do that. Want to run it through a filter, you can do that. And you can do that completely separately to the main oscillator. And so, personally, that sort of facility, I'd like to see that in every oscillator. Why can't we have that in everything, please? That would be great. The built-in VCA and Decay circuit is great. It's excellent. Very, very useful. I mean, could there not be an attack as well? Would it not be nice to have, can I hold shift and turn that knob and it become an attack knob as well? The decay is nice. It's just that perhaps a little bit more in that envelope would have been awesome. But of course you can take it out and put it through a VCA and envelope it in whichever way you choose. No problem. And then of course we come to the timbre section, which is excellent. As I say, it could be a module by itself. That could be a really useful processing module, giving you sort of pulse width, wave folding, windowing, weirdness, noising, and FM all within a single module. You can probably get that separately as things, but to have it built in, it interrupts, or it disrupts that exploration of wavetables. So you're not always, because all you tend to do on a wavetable thing, you stick in a slow modulation and it moves through the wavetables, and we do that all the time. Do it on everything. Do it on big synths and stuff. That tends to be the way. But that interrupts that, and it says stop messing around with the wavetables. Let's start messing around with changing the waveform that you've decided upon, and that's really interesting. It changes the way I think about wavetables, and gives you another opportunity to craft and to change and to alter that timbre without just randomly exploring masses and masses of waveforms. So it's brilliant. I mean, the detuning mode, that by itself, just introducing that little bit of wobble, or that 4th, 5th, that duophonic nature, that octave, things like that, is a whole other level of interest and complexity and depth that you add to this single oscillator. The FM stuff, that's a load of fun as well. It's just kind of a riot once you get to that side of the knob, which is exciting. I should also add that if you tire of the wavetables within Osiris, within the 4 banks of 32 wavetables with 32 waves within each wavetable, then you can always add your own. Osiris have published an app that lets you extract wavetables or samples from samples and wavetables and stuff those into the front via the little SD card. Now, sadly, this is only available on Apple Mac, and so it's not something I've been able to look at or had a go at. And honestly, I'm not that bothered. It's not my scene, man. I just like to play with the wavetables that are in the device. But if that is your thing and you have a Mac, then you have the possibility of adding a forever amount of wavetables yourself. I'm not blown away by the low fidelity thing particularly. Maybe it's a particular style or function that other people really enjoy, and that's cool. Works well enough. I just not quite so taken on what the big deal is. But that's not to say that you can't be. So that is the Osiris from Modbap. I hope that was interesting. It's the finest wavetable oscillator I've played with, absolutely. And I've played with a couple of good ones, I have to say. It's just the constant movement, the fact that it breeds this deep level of dissatisfaction. You go, no, that's not quite there. It's not quite there. It's not quite there. Oh, that's better. That's better. Oh, no, that's better. Oh, no, that's better. Oh, what about that? That's better. That's better. Oh, now I'm back to where I was, but that's better. You you just want to keep adding. You just start playing and then you want to play more. I'm not going to leave that at -2. I'm going to bring that back up to -1 and experience how that, that drop away, that low note is then pulled out and it's gone up an octave. And that's just great. And then you're playing around with the normal waveforms on the sub, and then you're changing a few more. So you're exploring a few more wavetables and you drop that second octave in again. Oh, that's just fantastic. And then you wind in some wave folding, and then you go back to that fifth, and now you're doing that, and now you explore. Do you see what I mean? It's a never-ending pursuit of awesomeness where everything is continuously being awesomer. Yeah. So yeah, the Osiris by Modbap. It's a fairly juicy and fabulous wavetable oscillator. So there you go. I hope that was helpful. Please remember to subscribe to the channel for lots of different modular stuff, different takes on modules, from DIY, building synthesizers, playing with stuff, live performances, but also software, audio interfaces, MIDI controllers, all sorts of stuff you'll find in my channel, and with a very, I believe, interesting, fascinating and unique take on these things. Also, feel free to join us on Patreon. There's a bunch of people over there who are just fantastic, who support me in my video making and content creation, and you could be one of those lovely people, so that's fantastic. Do go and check that out and just throw me a couple of quid, because that would be enormously helpful. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.